So the first thing I want to say to everybody is good morning. We certainly appreciate you joining us this morning. Uh, we're really thinking of this as an exciting and informative look at conscious leadership, and we're going to look at that through the eyes of someone who really practices it, and that's Mr. Greg Massey of First United Bank in Oklahoma. We're going to talk to him in a bit, and I'll get to his introduction. But before we get started, I did want to introduce you to the folks that are involved with our chapter here in Houston. So the first person I would like to talk about is Dustin Palmer. Dustin is the he's on the volunteer advisory board for us. And he's an accomplished Houston real estate broker. He's got 14 years of experience in that. He does a lot of project planning and execution through relationship building. And Dustin has really set out in his life to build conscious businesses. The second person that I want to introduce you to is Devlin Lyles. And Devlin is our vice president. And he is, and bear with me just a moment, I have too many papers. He's the president of Improving Houston, and he's a passionate technologist. He prides himself on staying a generalist, but his passion is in leveraging technology to solve the problems facing business. He has an entrepreneurial mindset. He is one of the founding employees of the Houston office of Improving. And he has been, 10 years at Improving, a long time. And he himself also is extremely passionate. I owe a lot to him for getting this chapter back off the ground during our relaunch. Devlin, would you like to tell a little bit about our chapter?
Absolutely. So thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. This year is kind of a revitalization of the Houston chapter. So the Houston chapter has been running for a lot of years on the backs of effort of Sarah and Dustin and Leslie and Catherine and the folks at Savage. And Improving's been a big part of that as well. But we really felt like we could do more and we could go further. And so this year you're seeing that bigger vision revitalization. So we're going to be doing quarterly events on each of the tenants, kicking off this morning with Greg and Conscious Leadership. And then each quarter having a kind of a group discussion like this one. And then in between those events, we'll actually be having a business leader forum for executives talking about how to apply this in their business, how to operationalize a lot of the tenets we're hearing about. And if you're interested in that one, please reach out to houston@consciouscapitalism.org, and we can get you an invite to that to kind of really join that leadership conversation.
Perfect. Thank you, Devlin. So let's just start real quick with a bit of an explanation about conscious capitalism, and let's just explore the 4 tenets of that. So bear with me as I share with you guys.
And while Leslie's getting that shared, feel free, we've muted everybody just for background noise control, but if you've got questions, you want to participate in the conversation, feel free to use the chat that's in the tool or unmute and ask a question. You can also raise your hand so that you're not interrupting and kind of go through there, and we'll be going through it.
Yes, absolutely. And this is going to be a very quick overview because we really want to get to Greg and have a discussion with him. So just to let you know, conscious capitalism is really more than a way of doing business. It's more than how you operate. It's really a philosophy, if you will. There's a lot more to it than just making a few changes. It's something that is more or less a way of life when you go down this road. Now, the thing to remember is that though there are 4 tenets, to be a conscious capitalist, you do not have to actually practice all 4 tenets perfectly. So we are all in an iterative learning process as we go through things. And so that is one of the reasons that we put the Business Leaders Forum together, is just acknowledging the fact that some of these tenets may be difficult, especially in these times coming out of a pandemic. And so always bear that in mind. Reach out for any assistance or any information on these. We're here to help you. But quickly, let's just go through those 4 tenets. So the first one is purpose. And so purpose, as you can see on the screen, is really about having a focus on your purpose of your business beyond profit. I'd like to say back in the old days, 200 years ago, I baked bread, you made shoes. I would be barefoot if you didn't make shoes, and you would be hungry if I didn't make bread. So we found a way to exchange these things, whether for money or trades or whatever it is, and so that we elevated the whole entire community by doing that. And so what is the purpose of your company? Why are you there besides making money? Who are you there to serve? So ask yourself those questions. The second is stakeholder. You know, a lot of times what we've seen, especially through the 80s and 90s, is that it's been more of a stockholder push and making money for the stockholder. Whereas with conscious capitalism, stakeholders' focus is to maximize return for all shareholders. And so the thing is that these businesses recognize the importance of creating value for the entire business ecosystem. That's everyone. That's your environment, your employees, your customers, your suppliers, everyone. The third is culture. So culture is the guiding principles and practices underlying the social fabric of a business. And so if you have a healthy conscious culture, you're going to connect stakeholders to each other and to the company's purpose, the people, and the processes. And so building that culture, there's a lot of thought behind that. There's a lot of mindfulness of understanding that every decision that you make has an impact that ripples through many lives. And so what decisions will you make based on that? And then the last I'm going to mention, which is exactly where we're starting today, is leadership. So leadership, conscious leadership, is an area where the leaders really understand the integral role of culture and purposefully cultivate an environment of trust, care, and service for the entire business ecosystem. So what does that mean? That means that they lead not just with their hearts or not just with their heads, but a combination of both, and understanding that what they have to do to really involve people, value people. And when I say that, it's more than employees, value all those that contribute to the growth of the company. So that is conscious capitalism in a nutshell. What I'd like to do now is introduce Greg Massey. And we're really excited to have Greg with us today. Greg is a native of Durant, Oklahoma. He's the CEO of First United Bank Trust Company, which is an $8 billion financial services organization, and he operates in 62 communities throughout Oklahoma and Texas. They actually deliver to over 300,000 customers through a network of community banks, mortgage offices, insurance agencies, and wealth management locations. They are a purpose-based community bank organization, and they inspire and empower others to spend life wisely. In fact, hopefully Greg will tell us a little bit about Spend Life Wisely as he talks with us. So here is an example of the fact that any company of any size can create and live and work in a conscious capitalism model. So Greg, welcome. We're happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Well, we're really glad to be able to chat with you. We do have some questions for you this morning. And so just to let the audience know, after we get through the questions, there's going to be some time for questions that you can ask or comments that you can make. So if you could hold those to the end, kind of jot them down, or if you, I'm not sure about Teams, if you can do a chat, but if so, feel free to do so. But let's start with the first question, Greg, and that is, what does conscious leadership look like at First United Bank? Or maybe what are the key components of how First United practices conscious leadership?
Well, I always think of the word awareness and is, how do we let our leaders become more aware, and what are the practices around that? And so I think through maybe our meeting structure. So each one of our meetings, we start out with check-ins. And so you come into a meeting, it might be a past due meeting or a leadership meeting, or maybe something we're trying to solve a problem meeting. And we start out with just check-ins. And all check-ins does, it does a lot of things. First of all, just from an emotional intelligence perspective, but it starts, you start the meeting with inquiry. So the first step of awareness is inquiry and understanding where people are, et cetera. So it actually creates an environment in that meeting of inquiry, and that hopefully holds all the way through that particular meeting. So just how do we become more aware? One of the things that, about the tenets of conscious capitalism is all four of them. And, when you think about a leadership team that becomes more aware, you've got to hold the stakeholder model up high. And we've actually, from a stakeholder perspective, we have a diagram that shows all five of our stakeholders. And then when we become more aware, we actually want to make a decision that's good for all five of the stakeholders. And so, sometimes I'd like to give an example. And maybe a good example this morning might be if you think, we're a community banking organization. Well, if you just look through the lens, right, of a bank and through the lens of a stockholder, we'd say, well, we want everybody to have a lot of debt so we can make a lot of money. So it might be credit card debt, or maybe for a home loan, or whatever it might from a consumer perspective. And so we say, if we can, just pile on more debt, we can actually earn more interest and therefore make more money. Now, if you're a conscious business, right, if you're in your leadership team is thinking through the lens of the stakeholder model, we'd actually go to higher ground, okay, and look at the lens through all of our stakeholders. Now, what if we look through the lens and say, hey, what if our community had better health, financial health, and what if we got people out of debt and had more savings, and what if the stress of their life was lower and they became better employees, and now we could use that savings and actually invest it back in our community businesses. And by doing that, now all of a sudden they have better employees, we have better business. And oh, by the way, by doing that from a broader, with more awareness, the bank can actually make more money and the community's healthier at the same time. So now all of a sudden, by a larger perspective, we've actually solved a real important problem through the ecosystem.
That is great. I love how you actually start your meetings with becoming more aware with the check-ins. And then, of course, what you mentioned of all your five stakeholders when you make decisions, looking at those. Thank you for sharing that. One of the next question really I have is, and you've probably already answered this for the most part, how does First United Bank differentiate between leadership as it's known and conscious leadership? Are there a few words of wisdom that you could use to sort of help people envision that difference?
I think back to just our values, and our values are core. There's two core values of them, which is we call extending love and making impact. And so as we extend love, right, and if you think from a leadership perspective, if I truly, and we actually have several words that describe extending love: faith, family, integrity. So think about this. So if I put my faith first and my family second and my bank family, and I truly care and love for them and do it in the right way through integrity, you can't help but want to make impact in their lives. And so as we enlarge our hearts, right, for our other human beings around us, you can't help but to integrate, just that sense and feel of care and love. And so there's only two human emotions in the world. There's love and fear. So as we bring in new leaders, we'll they'll spend a day with me, and one of the things I tell them, I said, I hope that if you come in here as a leader and you come in and do what the world does, which is lead by fear, I hope the company rejects you and you leave. Because see, if you come in and say, hey, if you've got to do X or I'm going to fire you, so that's leading through fear.
Yes.
But if I say, hey, then we've got to accomplish this, okay, we want to be high performers, but we're doing this because of our purpose to make this world a better place, because of our purpose, and here's why we're going to do this, and we do this out of love, And that's the difference in leadership. And so leaders in this world that we see today, and we have to reprogram people, because that's just how the business world is. They're doing it out of fear versus love. And when you transpose love to fear, I mean, it changes everything. And then that way, what's interesting, I was down in South Texas, and one of our core values is family. And family, there's just this, this connectivity with family, that where we love each other. And she said, when our customers come into our community bank, they can sense the love and care we have for each other, and they just want to join in. And all of a sudden, so they're all of a sudden the connectivity right between, they can feel that sense of love. I think about a Chick-fil-A, I'm a big Chick-fil-A fan, but isn't it funny how the sense, you just get a different sense walking in there versus McDonald's. And my belief is that they are managing more from a foundational principle of love versus a foundational deal of fear. Do this or this.
Oh, I hear you, Greg. That's so right. When you use Chick-fil-A as an example, that's perfect. If you've read anything about, I think his name is Dan Cathy, if you've read anything about his legacy, and I think his son is now carrying it on, the fact that they do definitely lead out of love and not out of fear. And it is totally different to go into that restaurant. And I think if I could sum up what you just said, as far as the difference between regular leadership and conscious leadership for First United, it's 4 words: leading out of love.
Yeah.
You would agree?
Absolutely. Isn't it funny how we overcomplicate things in life?
Yeah, too much, isn't it?
Yes. Before everybody got done, we were talking about our morning time, and I have an office in my house, and there's a picture of my mother gave me this, a picture of me when I was a small kid and my son. And I was literally the other day, I was sitting there just staring at that picture, and I'm thinking, man, I just want to be that guy again. See, I mean, we I want to be unprogrammed by the world, because we were programmed right to begin with, right? And then all of a sudden this world programs us this way that, hey, this is the way you're supposed to behave. And you go, where did this come from? I just want to be that kid again, and act like a kid, and have the faith I had as a kid, and have the love and the joy I had as a kid. And I want our organization to be this fun place to come to work. We're adding on to our facility here in Durant, and one of the things we're doing in our break room, we're actually putting a ping pong table. So I know Improving has ping pong tables. I actually got it from Curtis, but they're down at Frisco office. But anyway, and then the point, I don't care about anybody playing ping pong, but I want people to say it's okay to come to work and have fun. It's okay to enjoy yourself, and we're going to be together all day anyways. Let's have a smile on our face.
That's absolutely perfect. And Greg, I believe Devlin has a question.
Yeah, so I was wondering, you mentioned when leaders come in, you hope that if they lead incorrectly, the organization rejects them. And I know coming to Improving, it was culture shock for me in experiencing kind of previous employer, definitely fear-based, to Improving. How do you teach that, right? It goes beyond we hope it rejects you, but like, we hope you change. How do you teach that? Have you found that there are certain things that are successful in teaching somebody to lead in love?
I think the key thing is just continue to get your values I always say, how do you get your values off the wall into the culture? And then the culture becomes alive. So, we have a number of practices that we do. So I talked about our meeting practice, and the second thing we do with our meetings is the second part of every meeting in the company is we talk about our purpose and values. And so on a weekly basis, I send out a letter. Melissa, who's our chief culture officer, and myself, we send out a letter and just talk about our values. What was interesting about that is I was actually at a Conscious Capitalism Summit having a lunch with some guys, and I was asking them how do they do that, and that's when I came back and said, I've got this great idea. We're going to send out a letter to all of our leaders every week, and we're going to start leading every meeting with our culture. And it was so exciting for like the first 10 weeks, because you're writing this letter. Now, after about 5 or 6 years of doing this, it's like, okay, what are we going to write about this week? And what's happened as a leader, it started changing me, because, you talk about faith, you talk about family, or you talk about high performance teams, or how we're going to serve our relationships in healthy communities, and what these different values that we have. How do we actually hold on to those and talk about them? And by forcing yourself to actually write and talk about them, you're actually elevating yourself. At the same time, you're elevating the organization. And the same thing happened with our leaders. Now all of a sudden, I'm leading a meeting inside of my community bank, and I'm going to talk about one of these values or about our purpose, and that whole thing just starts really gets the organization to completely buy in. And once you have a complete buy-in, you get someone coming in without that buy-in. I mean, it's like they stand out, and they can feel it and sense it. So, and typically what we find, and we recruit to those values, by the way. And so what happens is, they are attracted to come here because of the values, and they get here and they love it. But yet they've been programmed by the world. And so I always say it just takes a year. It takes a couple of years to reprogram them. And so I hope because this value of love, right? I hope our folks love them and care for them long enough to transform them, and not to expect this, like, just because you're here you're going to change overnight. And by the way, there's days that I mess up. I mean, I'm like, my gosh, we got to get this done, and I'm sure it can come across to other people that's coming from more fear-based and love-based. So that's just I think just a transition over time for all of us.
And that actually goes back to when you're practicing conscious capitalism and you're looking at the 4 pillars. You're not always perfect, and that's the thing. What we do is we strive to meet those, and to be conscious of what we're doing, but we're humans, right? And so that happens. So I think actually that led perfectly into my next question, which was, at what point did you decide to, or realize that you are practicing conscious leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question for us, and it's interesting. I joined the bank in 1990, and my father was an entrepreneur, an ex-politician, and was a state senator and had done public service his whole life. And so when I got here in 1990, we were already conscious capitalism and never heard the word, nor did we have a purpose, or did we have values, or did we, do some of these practices. But the organization could feel the heart and care that Dad and I had for our communities. They could feel the heart and love we had for our customers. They could feel we called our family at work our work family, and so they weren't employees, they were family, and so that was already there. And so as we started growing the organization, we went from 1 billion to 2 billion in about 3.5 years. Back about, that's been 15, 20 years ago. We're 10.5 billion today, which is hard to believe. But anyway, that was a huge growth spurt for us, because that was to the size where I was not meeting, or Dad was not meeting everybody at the water cooler once a day. And so also we had to actually put some practices in place so we wouldn't lose our culture, because it was slipping away from us. And so we actually stopped. One of the smartest things we did from a growth perspective was completely put the brakes on and said, hey, we're going to stop as an organization, we're going to take a breath, and we're going to get our culture back right. And I think culture is everything. And from a strategy perspective, culture always will eat strategy. And so if you can get your purpose and values and vision and strategy and execution all aligned, amazing things can happen. And we've got to be smart enough as leaders to say, hey, when things are a little bit off kilter, can we actually put the brakes on and stop and get things back in line? And so today, our culture is stronger today at $10.5 billion than it was when we were a $2 billion organization.
That is wonderful to hear. Also, this is not a question I'd planned to ask, but it does lead to one in my mind, and that is, when you put the brakes on and focused on that culture, I'm making an assumption that business sort of slowed down while that was happening. Can you tell us about the effects of that, and the gains that you actually made by slowing down?
Well, when we slowed down, we really got intentional. First of all, just about from a purpose perspective. So that's when we came out with to inspire and empower others to spend life wisely. So we truly became a purpose-based organization. That's when we created our values. And I say created, we spent a year going around the organization and listening to our employees and said, hey, if values are what we're going to be, values are how we behave. Behaviors are what we're going to be known for. So my question was always, what do we want to be known for as an organization? So we had, and I purposely stayed out of those conversations. I had a group of folks that was led by Melissa Perrin and David Anderson, and they went around the organization and listened deeply to our employees and said, hey, what are these values? So we got those on a piece of paper and had our stakeholder tree, had a purpose. And so we literally just stopped long enough. I did the same thing with strategy, by the way. So now how do we actually have a strategy that connects back to that purpose? So this is our intention. Now, how do we actually have a strategy that connects? So it was really just almost a stopping. I always say in business, you can't completely put the brakes on because you're doing business every day.
That's true.
Yeah. So, there was loans. We had to make loans and take in deposits, open new accounts, and just the things that we do as an organization. So when I say put on the brakes, you're putting on the brakes of a pretty efficient machine that was working. So these things take longer. I think one of the problems with business today is they're not willing to tip on to know when to put the brakes on. And also how allow the human capital to catch up with your growth. And so in our world, we talk about financial capital and human capital. And so to grow an organization, you've got to grow both of them at the same time and be able to make sure one doesn't outgrow the other and be smart enough when they're out of whack. And inside that human capital side, you can think of that as just, people, but more, part of people is culture. And it may be the biggest part is culture. So that's that balancing act you got to do as an organization as you scale and grow.
Greg, thank you so much for adding that piece to it. I have one more add-on question for that, and that is, as you went through and surveyed, as you had folks talk to the people within the organization, was there any kind of a methodology that you used to determine who you would talk to? I would imagine there would be too many people to talk to everyone, or did you actually do something?
No, we absolutely talked to everyone. So that's why it took a year. We if you worked here, we talked to them, and so we basically had whiteboard meetings and they would actually go up and just write down, hey, what are these values? And I can tell you, I was shocked. One of the hard things for me was actually, which the company is known for today is faith. And so for years we've had an annual meeting for 30 years, and this will be the first one this year that we're going to have to do virtual versus all together. But when we have an annual meeting, we bring in every employee. It's not, most organizations will just bring in leadership teams, but we bring in every employee once a year for annual meeting. And what was the point I was trying to make about that? I got off on the annual meeting. What was your question? I just went blank.
Just actually who you chose to talk with, and we were talking about you.
Yeah, so they came in and we'd have these annual meetings, and my dad would get up at the end of every annual meeting and would say, we're going to put God first, our family second, and our job third. And so when we did these walk through the company and they put stuff on the board, they would actually sometimes quote that, and then we talk about faith as one of our values. And I was just one of those that, I wanted people to know about my faith, but by the way, I love other people, not because I put a fish sticker on my back of my car. And I hope no one has a fish sticker in the back of their car. But what I'm talking about, you go around that someone's got this fish sticker, and you zoom around them, and they give you, they wave at you with only one finger, and so, so I was concerned how we actually do that in the right way, and then all of a sudden that's what we're known for. But yet at the same time, like you said, we are a work in progress, and no one puts God first, family second, work third. That's something that we all strive for. There's only one guy that did that, and we killed him on the cross. And so we know it's something that it's something that's aspirational, but not something we can do. So I was just like in awe of how they did, and also the balance, right? So we have faith, family, integrity, but we also have high performance. One of my great stories I can share with you. I was in our location in Madill, Oklahoma, and this young lady said, I love being part of a high performance team. And this really got me. This is such a great. I said, how come? She said, Greg, when I work on this high performance team, when I walk out of the door and shut the door at night, I can completely shut the door of the bank and never worry about it. And I can go home and be with my kids and be fully present with them.
Oh, you just gave me goosebumps.
Wow. I mean, and so I think sometimes as leaders, we think, hey, I'm pushing folks to high performance and it's bad. But actually it's good, because when we're not performing well at work, that's when we go home. That's when we worry. Right. And I should have done this. I should, et cetera. We can't help as human beings wanting to strive for excellence. But if we create organizations of excellence, they actually can go home and be better human beings and being, better for folks. One of the things I'll add, we did a leadership program internally. And oftentimes when they get through with the leadership program, I'll have people say, now, Greg, I'm not sure if I'll be a better leader, but I will be a better father. I'll be a better husband. I'll be better in my community. And of course, I'm laughing inside of myself, thinking, yeah, right. All those things are the same thing, right? We know that as human beings.
Yeah, well, there's a saying in the coaching world that how you do things one place is how you do it everywhere.
Absolutely.
And so that certainly ties into that. Thank you for sharing that story. That was really moving for me. I hope the audience found it the same. So let's talk about 2020 for a minute. A year that no one is thrilled over. Did 2020 change your leadership focus at all? And if so, how?
No, thank goodness for us to be so focused on the stakeholder tree. Thank you for having such a great purpose, and a great strategy. I can remember the day I'm driving to work, and it was probably in March, and it was like, holy cow, this is for real. What are we going to do? What should I do as a leader? And I literally came in my office, and Dev and I have a whiteboard kind of like you do right there behind you, and I came in on a whiteboard that exactly that same size, and I wrote down each one of our stakeholders, and then drew a line and said, okay, what do we need to do as an organization for our customers? And so we were like the first bank that I know of that came out with a deferral program before the SBA. I said, what do we need to do for our employees? We knew we had to stay open. Money flow has to, so they're going to be in danger. What do we need to do for them? What are we going to do for our stockholders? We knew, we didn't know, but we thought that the financial markets would crash. And as a good capitalist, I'm thinking, how do I take advantage of these markets? And so we made some incredible financial moves in April and May that everybody else was, maybe focused somewhere else. And then what do we need to do for our communities? And how do we need to communicate with our partners? And so we literally, and that was 7:00 one morning. I called a emergency meeting of my executive team, and I had a skeleton. And then I said, okay, now let's look through through these lenses. Now, what are the things, and how do we actually make lists, and what do we do? So because we had the stakeholder model. So I always say so many banks or maybe other businesses, sometimes you just get a lens. Right, so I can just get a lens for employees, or maybe I just get a lens for customers, and so by having the ability to look at all those perspectives, and then we were able to actually make a list and move really fast. And I've never been so proud. The negative. Now here's your negative with great purpose, and this is maybe where you wanted to go with this, but the negative with a great purpose, a negative with when you truly love and care, you can hurt people. And so this year we did over, I think it was $700 million in PPP loans. we doubled our originations in home mortgages. And so that was a lot of work. And so our folks were working night and day trying to take care of our customers, but they weren't taking care of themselves. And so as a leader, I really had to say, guys, we've got to take care of our communities. We've got to take care of these relationships, but you also got to take care of you.
Did you put anything in place to help them do that?
Yeah, it's interesting. This year, I think it's called Made For, and I don't know if you've seen it, but that was my gift for Christmas to all of our senior leaders this year. So all of our senior this is month one. I got my little bottle here. So there's like a list of things they help you create new practices for. And this month is actually water. So and you can see the little beads here on my water jug. But as you drink water every day, you count it. But it was just a way for me to say, hey, we got to continue to take care of ourselves. And I'm really curious this year, as that gift every month. One month is gratitude, how to create gratitude in your life. So it goes through several steps throughout the year. But the point being, I hope that by doing that across the organization to every leader, that it ripples down through the whole organization.
That's great. And I love the fact that it's not a huge program, but you have a small thing that shows how much you value them and how much they really are loved and what they bring to the organization. So what role would you say conscious leadership has played in the continued success of First United Bank?
Well, when I think about conscious leadership, it's how do we as a leader go to the mountaintop? So you think of, always visualize Moses at the mountaintop, right? So how in conscious leadership, if we're actually going above, and so how do we actually serve others and go into that stakeholder model and listen and care? But yet, as a conscious leadership team, how do we go above the fray and say, how does all this interconnect together? And then how do we actually look at this from a broader perspective? And so you cannot, I think, really obtain a real conscious leadership team without a lot of development work. And so, we really believe in support both vertical and horizontal development within our leadership team. And so we all have our, including me. And so, I remember years ago, I went to, I had a coach, and I went to him, I said, do I have the capability to run this organization? And he said, Greg, your organization is stuck until you grow. And so as a leader, I made a commitment 13 years ago that I would spend 2 hours a day on my own development. And so what's interesting is I develop and grow. All of a sudden the executive team wants to develop and grow. All of a sudden the senior leadership wants to, develop and grow. And so you have this just a organization that is based on learning and growing. And then as we learn and grow, and from a vertical and a horizontal perspective, it creates this whole thing called inquiry. And when we have a lot of inquiry, you have a lot of questions that need to be answered, and then you're able to get to higher, maybe this mountaintop view of the organization to make better strategy and better execution within that strategy.
That is, I love that answer. It also ties into what I term as self-selecting out, right? If you get the wrong person in there, if they're not willing to learn and grow as the entire leadership team is, then they either select out or they learn, and they realize the benefit to themselves by actually taking part in that growth and that learning. I have one last question for you, Greg, and that is, how will leadership impact or support a post-COVID-19 world at First United Bank?
Well, I think we just got to continue to watch this thing as it goes. I was listening to CNBC. I live about 30 miles outside of where I work, and it's interesting just listening to how fast the vaccine is going to come out, what that looks like, when does the world kind of turn back on, et cetera. So, I don't know if it changes what we do a whole lot. There's issues internally, like, do we allow certain folks to work from home, and what would that look like, et cetera. But I think long term, I think people want to be around other people. I'd a lot rather be in Houston today and be at a chapter meeting with you guys and be able to, because this is really neat for me because I'm able to do this and meet some new folks today without having to travel. And I remember I went to Chicago right before COVID and being there in their chapter room, I met 50 people from Chicago and got to hang out with them. And so sometimes the hanging out's more important than what I'm doing right here. And so I think I'm missing the human connectivity. So I think we all are. So it'll be interesting to see. I think more importantly is how do we actually help our communities and our teams over the next 3 to 6 months. And what we're seeing today is a really big spike in COVID and internally and externally. And so, I think really managing this over the next 3 months is going to be really important. How do we keep our employees safe and their families safe, and also how do we serve our communities at the same time?
It's very important to keep all of those safe, the employees and the community. The community definitely needs to feel that. Now, Greg, what you just said to me kind of struck me. You said that you would like to be in Houston at a chapter meeting today instead of on a Teams meeting. So I'm going to take that as a possible yes for when we can get together in person again. How about that?
I'd love to sometime. Absolutely.
That would be great. We'd love to have you here and host you here. Well, that is what I want to wrap this up real quick with. Is there anything else, Greg, that you would love to share with us concerning conscious leadership or any of the pillars that you practice at First United?
I'd just be glad to answer any questions.
Well, we're ready to do that. So if you want to ask questions, folks, just raise your hand. We'll call on you. All right, we have Richard Fox. Richard, unmute yourself if you will.
Sure. Thanks for all that you're sharing with us today, Greg. So you were talking about how when you were coming up with a purpose as a leader, going around to every employee and getting their thoughts on that. As your organization has grown, as your leadership team has grown, and down to your frontline workers, how are you bringing them in, making sure that they understand the purpose, and also has you adapted your purpose to the new perspectives that have been brought in with the new people?
Yeah, great question. So the purpose was actually done by our leadership team, both a group of board members and executive team. The values were actually done by our people. So values were done by our folks and every employee, and the purpose, our executive team. We have, it's interesting. The original purpose I wrote down when I was listening to Roy Spence speak 12 years ago at a Conscious Capitalism Summit in Austin, Texas. We reworded that about 7-8 years ago with the executive team and our board members, and so there's kind of two sides of that. But I will say, it's been interesting for me just to as you bring in new leaders to actually allow them to lean into those and actually connect to those and to believe in them. And so it does take some time. And that's with strategy itself. We just recently, and we're rolling it out next month at our annual meeting, but we just I hate to say reworded them, but we simplified our values to be a little bit more concrete. And so our ad agency helped us. So it's the same values, but we just re-articulated them a little bit, and we're rolling that out this month. So we refined them a little bit, and to do that, we did the same thing. So a year and a half ago, I went to every community bank and sat down with every employee and actually said, how are you living these values out? And it was so much fun. It was like the funnest I've done in years. But we literally went into these different community banks and just on a whiteboard, and they would tell us stories about these values and what they looked like to them, and what they cared about. And we took that intel back into the laboratory, if you will, with our communication folks, and going, okay, here's what I was hearing. Here's how they're living them out. Maybe this is a better way to actually verbalize those, where people connect to them in a deeper way.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Richard. Are there any other questions? Any comments? Well, I am going to take, go ahead.
How you doing? This is Jeff Laguerre. I do have a question first and foremost. Thank you, Greg. I wanted to retouch on a point that you brought up. I think it's something that is important on how you handle growth in the culture. You know, as you continue to grow and culture grows, sometimes integrity is compromised, right? And quality lessens a little bit. And you kind of touched on it. How do you handle growth and keeping the culture up without losing profits? What is the key point that you did, not only to acknowledge it, but fix it immediately and still keep the integrity and the culture going as you continue to grow?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing is getting rid of culture cancer. And, you know, and we've all had situations where you have high performers, and but they kill your culture. And so we've had multiple cases where both some leaders have come into the company and were not, they just couldn't hold on to our culture and making those hard decisions. I could tell a story of, so we're large in the mortgage business. And by the way, we've got mortgage folks in Houston. But anyway, but we are really good in the mortgage business. But gosh, 10 years ago, our sales leader in that mortgage business was just not our culture. And so we made a decision to part ways with him. And we were concerned that he might take 50 to 70% of our mortgage originators with him. And that was a hard decision. It ended up, I think we lost 2 people. And so, but those are sometimes hard decisions to make, because you can get so profit minded and go, man, am I really willing to sacrifice everything for this cultural thing? And I think as a leader, those are the tough decisions. And I think when the company sees you're serious about it, they become serious about it as well.
Okay, I have a quick follow-up to that. Do you feel when you made that decision, as tough as it may be, that other leaders that were potential cancers or was heading that way reinvested into the culture of the company and integrity and joined on ship? And also, do you feel, if you would have had to do that again, that losing a top performer or losing a high performance performer is still a necessary evil, if you will, in order to keep the company going, to keep the company growing the way you want it to?
Yeah, so I think that was the hardest one we ever had to go through. And so now today, because of almost like after a little bit of success of doing that, it's actually easier to do that, because you will recruit culture cancer inside the company, and when we see that, we've had to make a move, and some of those have been really hard. And we had another lady that was in charge of our deposit operations group, and here again she was not aligned with our culture, and she was a 20-year employee, and that was a really hard one. And so, yeah, they don't get easy, but once you do a few, I think other people feel that, like, throughout the organization, going, hey, this person just doesn't fit the organization and the culture we're trying to create, and it's hindering us. And so I think I do think there's a difference. So our culture is so strong that not everybody's completely bought in. And so that's okay. So you've got to meet people where they are and connect with them and move them forward. And that's fine. What's not fine when they're just they're going the opposite way, right, and completely destroying it. So I don't want someone on the call to think, man, that you got to walk in and be perfect, because no one is. I'm not, but they can't be just a cancer to it, and there's a fine line there, but between what those two things are, and that's what takes to here again go back to the subject today of conscious leadership. That's when you got to get above the clouds a little bit, go down. What is this person? Are we doing the right? What's right? And integrity. I always say, what's right for the organization versus what's right for the individual. What's right for the collective versus the individual, and that's where tough decisions really are sometimes. And you got to sometimes hold the organization at a higher level than you do the individual, and that's a hard one.
I can see where that would be difficult, Greg, but at the same time, I think if you hold the organization higher than the individual in the lens that you're looking through, then really you're holding all of the people who are there that are trying not to have the cancer. You're helping them actually be more healthy in the long term. So those decisions are hard, and I hear that, and at the same time, I hear why they have to be made.
And I really have as a leader have an easier time there. I'll tell you where I actually have a harder time sometimes when they fit the culture but they can't perform. And it's and so that's a harder one for me sometimes, where they're just a great cultural fit inside the organization and add to our culture, but man, they just can't do their job, and that's the tough one for me.
Yeah, that would be very difficult. We are at 8:21. We have about 9 minutes left. Are there any other comments or questions?
I just wanted to say, Greg and Leslie, thank you for the conversation. This has been great. I've enjoyed it over a good cup of coffee. I got a page and a half of notes. So thank you guys for this one.
Yes, well, thank you, Devlin. And I'm going to wrap up now by just saying again, thank you guys for starting your day with us this morning. We know that 7:30 to 8:30 is very early. We do trust that you found value in the time that you spent. So if you would, please take a moment and visit our website and at least sign up to our mailing list so that you can stay informed about all the future events and our educational opportunities. You can do that, and I don't have a slide for this, forgive me, but it's really easy to remember. It is www.consciouscapitalism.org/Houston. And I'm going to repeat that one more time in case you were grabbing a pen or a pencil. www.consciouscapitalism.org/Houston. And of course, there's another piece here. If you would like to support our chapter in any way, whether it's to just give some feedback, be a sponsor, whatever, just send us an email. Let us know where this might fit into your world. And that email address, as Devlin had mentioned earlier, actually is Houston@consciouscapitalism.org. And that's Houston@consciouscapitalism.org. So thank you to Dustin and to Devlin and to Greg for making this very possible. And we appreciate your attendance here, everyone. I hope, again, that you have found value. I trust that you did. And you guys have a great day.